Welcome to Red Gum Barbecue here on the beautiful Mornington Peninsula. I'm Martin Goffin, the owner pitmaster at Red Gum Barbecue, and today we are gonna cook a brisket. So, when it comes to talking about brisket and picking a brisket, there's a few things you need to look for. I'm just gonna pull out this brisket that I've sneakily got ready. So what I'm looking for in a brisket is a nice big one. 5 kilos plus is perfect for me. It's really important that you get something big. It just tends to dry out less. This is at least a 5 kilo brisket. I'm looking for something that has a fair amount of marbling through it. All my briskets here at the restaurant are at least 2+ in marble score. Brisket is from the chest of the cow. It's a working muscle. It's something that's inherently going to be tough if you cook it hot and fast. This is why brisket's perfect for low and slow. I like to use grass-fed brisket, all pasture raised. This one here is from a Black Angus. A brisket consists of 2 muscles, a point and a flat. This is the point end. This is the bigger end. This is the end with 2 muscle groups. So the point sits on top of the flat. The point end is the fatty end and the flat is the lean end. This here is the flat. The flat is always going to be drier than the point. This is considered the fatty end. This is considered the dry lean end. But essentially what you're trying to do is cook a brisket which has obviously got one thicker end and one flatter, thinner end to the same point. So it's evenly cooked throughout. So hopefully today this is what I'm going to show you. Right, to trim up a brisket you're going to need a few things. I like to use 5 to 6 inch boning knife. And I use something a little bit different to most folks. I like to use a filleting knife, but these are perfect when you're trimming off this silvery skin on the bottom side of a brisket. So, right, let's crack on. So, what we're gonna do, we're gonna get a boning knife, a filleting knife, sorry, and we're gonna run it underneath this silvery skin. So just get your knife, run it under, away, and then back towards yourself. That way, we'll take a nice thin veneer off your brisket. This is the underneath, so all this needs to come off. Just keep running your knife under, taking off as much of this silveriness as you can. So there's a grain on a brisket. I'm trying to follow the grain. Just makes taking this sinew off that much easier. If you go against it, you tend to take big cuts out of it. So, I'm now looking at it, feeling it, put my hand against it, making sure that it's looking perfect before we flip it over. That's looking good to me. Right, I'll flip the brisket over. This is incredibly thin along here. What we're going to need to do is follow it until it starts to thin out, and then we're going to cut it back so it's a bit more even all the way along the brisket. So you can see where it starts to taper. Just cut it. Now following it round, this is all fairly thin. I'm going to take this back fairly significantly. Now we're starting to see a bit more thickness and uniform throughout the brisket. This point's up. I'm going to just trim this so it's less of a point. Let's more round it off. Now I'm looking at this side. I'm going to take this back along here because all this is fairly thin and it's potentially going to burn and crisp up. So, get my knife, run it along. A bit pointy there, got to take her back. So I'm looking here, that's where someone's been keen. And I'm just going to straighten this up along here. Now you can see. Usually there's a big fat vein that runs through there. What I want to do, now that it's been taken out, that was actually done in the boning room, I'm just going to trim this point muscle back. So it's fairly thin here. Bring it back so it's a bit more even, so this beauty cooks more evenly in the smoker. There's a few bits of sinew here we can just take off. Doesn't look appetizing. If you don't fancy eating it, take it off. But I do want to keep all this fat on top. There's not a hell of a lot of fat on top of this brisket because it's a grass-fed brisket. If it was a grain-fed, I'd expect to see a lot more white fat. This is fairly yellowy fat, and I'd expect to see a thicker coating. But I love grass-fed, always have. I believe it's got a much more of a cleaner flavour. And obviously not being stuck in a feedlot, being fed full of grain is, you know, good for the cow. So, you know, that's a trim brisket. Let's recap. So we've picked a brisket. I've explained exactly what you're looking for. Then I trimmed a brisket, letting you know how to trim the bottom of it, what to do on the top of it. Now let's talk about rubs. I'm a traditionalist when it comes to beef. Like all the great pit masters from Texas, I believe in salt and pepper. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. So the way I roll is very much like a cook me pork shoulder. I don't use oil to rub on my brisket prior to putting a rub on to get it to cling. I believe it creates a barrier between the flesh and the smoke where water's soluble. It'll get in there, smoke will run over it, it'll mix with the water, and it will penetrate your meat so you get a lovely smoky flavour. So, what I do first, I get some water and I give it a rub. Always starting with the bottom of your brisket first. So the bottom of the brisket is the bit I trimmed up the most. Then, salt and pepper. In Australia, kosher salt is larger crystals. We tend to use cooking salt, which is iodized sea salt. Use half the amount you would of kosher salt. So if I ask for 1 cup of kosher salt, use half a cup of your sea salt. We're going to sprinkle it over a brisket. I always sprinkle from a great big height. I don't sprinkle all up in close. You see guys do that. They get clumps of it everywhere. What you want to do is get an even spread. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get my tray, because I don't want to get me salt and pepper everywhere, and put it on my tray. I'm going to sprinkle my salt and pepper rub from a height, just to give it an even coating all the way over. Sprinkle, sprinkle, sprinkle. There we go. Make sure it's nice and even all the way over. All I'm going to do is just push these cracked black peppercorns into my brisket so they stay there. You spent a lot of money on these peppercorns, so get it in there. Give it a press. It's not rub, it's a push, it's a slap. Then we flip it over. That way, I'm not going to lose a lot of my salt and pepper. Right, same again with the top. From a height, sprinkle it over. All the way over my brisket. Giving it a press. Push it in. Then we'll get the edges. We've done the salt and pepper rub. We're going to leave this for 15 minutes. What that will allow to do is draw moisture out of that brisket, get that salt soluble so it will not crystallise and be dry on top of your brisket while you're cooking it. So, next step, taking this to the cooker. So if you like what you see, please subscribe to the channel, give us a like, and I'm going to take this to the cooker and you'll see it in the next video. See you soon.